Stories on Media. This is Coming Out Stories. It's a podcast about one of the most important conversations of your life. I'm Emma Goswell. You'll now hear from Owain Wyn Evans. He's now a successful TV weatherman who's out and proud. But he grew up in a small town in Carmarthenshire in Wales in the 1990s, where he was taunted for being a camp child.
Some people see it as a journey and they find who they are, later on in their childhood or as they become teenagers. But I think I always kind of knew that I liked men, and liked boys. It was never for me anything else other than that, I suppose. And I grew up in a place called Ammanford in southwest Wales. Now, Ammanford is a ex-kind of mining town, working class. And when I was growing up there, it was, as many people who have grown up in similar towns would probably tell you, it wasn't the easiest place to grow up as a gay man, because I didn't have any kind of role models or anyone who I could look up to in any way, shape or form who identified in the way that I thought that I identified.
Well, I don't want to go down the stereotype of saying we're the only gay in the village, but did it very much feel like that? Did it feel like you were the only one?
It definitely did. And I think that when I was in school, it was a different time, I suppose. I am 36 now, so going to school in Ammanford, even when I was a teenager, there weren't any kind of positive LGBTQ role models who I could speak of anyway, who were either in kind of pop music or on TV. You had programmes like Queer as Folk, which definitely shaped the way that I started seeing the outside world and how, gay people were able to kind of exist. And I was like, what is this programme, Who are these gay people?
Responsible for a lot of people moving to Manchester, I think, that, Owain.
I think you're right there, Emma, definitely. And I think it, from me, hundreds of miles away in Ammanford, I was like, where is this place? Take me there immediately.
If you were going to school in the 1990s, I guess it would still be in the sort of tail end of the effects of Section 28 in terms of teachers wouldn't have really mentioned LGBT issues in school, would they? People didn't talk about it.
Absolutely. Just didn't talk about it. If I wanted to speak about it, I didn't know who to turn to or who to speak to, because number one, you didn't know who you could trust, and number two, it just seemed very new, and you feel like you're on your own, don't you? And I know that I'm not alone in feeling that, because there are loads of people who were in this situation, but it was very, very strange. It took a long time for me to kind of accept that that's who I was. And I don't know if you felt like this at all, but I kind of felt that because I grew up at that time, that I missed out on a lot of stuff, like going to parties and going to, I don't know, bars or pubs and stuff, and doing the things that a lot of people in their late teens were perhaps doing. But because I felt like I was hiding this big thing, that was just not part of my life. And it's really sad.
Well, I certainly didn't miss out on parties and drinking. I was a big underage drinker. But the less said about that, the better. Was there a sense?
Absolutely.
Was there a sense then, do you think, that other people picked up on your differentness and treated you differently then? And it sounds like they might have ostracised you a bit then.
Yeah, I think so. It was very strange for me because I hate to say boyish. I absolutely hate to say that. But I was doing things that I think a lot of people considered quite boyish, in that I was a drummer. I used to ride like motorbikes on my friend's farm, all of these things, but I was also quite a camp child. So I don't know if people spent a lot of time thinking about it, to be honest, Emma, but certainly in school there were some times where I was called names and that sort of thing, but we've all been there, haven't we? But I think perhaps because I was a drummer and I was in lots of different bands in school, that kind of in a way made me a little bit more cool, dare I say it.
You're definitely cool, Owain. I've seen your drumming on Twitter. You're very good, actually.
Well, darling, if you would have seen my hairstyles when I was in school, I was definitely not cool.
Yeah, but it was the 90s. You probably had curtains, didn't you? Which are awful in any era.
Absolutely. But I guess it was cool then, wasn't it? So maybe I was super cool, actually, Emma.
Yeah, I mean, look at Boyzone. They had terrible hair, but, that's what people had in the 90s. God.
You've made me realise that actually I was a super cool child.
So while you were at school, you sort of worked this out for yourself then, it sounds like. You knew that you were a gay man. Did you ever articulate this? Did you ever feel brave enough to tell anyone else at school?
Not really, not when I was in school. I just thought that it just wouldn't, it wouldn't happen and I wouldn't be able to come out. And I don't know when I thought that would happen, but just as I left school, I got a job with the BBC. This was never the plan for me, because the intention was to leave school, and then because I was doing the drumming, I really wanted to become a professional drummer.
Phil Collins.
And I was doing Phil Collins, exactly. I was doing a little bit of that kind of work in bands and stuff, and I was helping some people who needed like drum tracks put down in studios and all that stuff. So it was fun. But there were two delights of mine, one of which was drumming and the other was stage lighting. And I actually went to university in Carmarthen to study theatre design and lighting. But the course wasn't for me, so I thought, you know what, no, I'm going to drop out. And then the plan was to get the grades up on the drums. Now, this is when I'd kind of started thinking about coming out, because I was suddenly in a kind of university-esque situation. And I told one or two of my friends, and they were all pretty much super supportive. Some of my friends who, even many, many years later, the conversation came up and, religion is such a weird thing, isn't it? And some of my friends basically told me that this wasn't right and that, I was going to be punished or blah, blah, blah.
Really? And this was at college in Carmarthen, yeah? These
were actually school friends. But it's weird, and I felt for a little while then that I was treated like the fun little gay, who people could wheel out for fun perhaps, and put back in a box when it was deemed inappropriate because it didn't fit in line with what they believed in religiously. But then I came out to my parents and they found it difficult because, well, I suppose, like me, there were no gay people, Emma. There were no gay people in Ammanford. It was just like...
They didn't have any reference point, did they? So can you remember can you remember the moment? Did you sit them down? Did you call them? How did you do it?
Yeah, I told my mother first. In hindsight, actually, she was actually okay. She did find it difficult, and then she told my father because I just didn't want to tell him. And my father is the loveliest man in the world. Like he's not an aggressive man. He's not nasty. Both of my parents are the loveliest people you could ever imagine. And it took them a bit of time, but now my parents are hugely kind in my life. They always have been. When Aaron and I got married, my mother
spoiler alert.
Oh, spoiler
Happy
alert.
ending,
sorry.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, sorry. Oh no, I skipped right to the end. When Aaron and I got married, my mother walked me in, Aaron's mother walked him in, and my father kind of witnessed the thing being signed. So, they are hugely important in our lives, and they love Aaron and I. But of course, it was hard for them at the beginning because all of a sudden we were a working class family. We didn't have very much money. And this whole thing was completely alien, really. And it was very difficult. But I told my brother, and my brother is a mechanic. And it's very strange, isn't it? I thought that he would find it harder than everybody else. But he was actually amazing. And he would take me to gay bars in Swansea. And the first introduction to gay bars was through my brother Rhys. Rhys is straight. And he would take me to these places and, see if I wanted to go to these kind of places that were safe for me to go to. And, was very supportive and brilliant. So it's very strange how things turn out differently to what you imagine, isn't it?
It's interesting, isn't it? A lot of people say that sometimes, particularly I've heard trans people say this actually, you can write a list of who you think is going to accept it and who isn't, and you might as well turn it upside down or rip it up because, people always surprise you actually. Usually in a good way. More importantly, I've now discovered that there are in fact gay bars in Swansea. Who knew?
Well, yes, absolutely. Oh, darling, honestly, it was quite the hub at one stage.
Was it?
Well, I don't know, maybe that's pushing it a bit too far. There was a place called H2O, which was, as the name suggests, near the waterfront.
Very good.
And now that's closed down, unfortunately, and I think it's a Chinese buffet type place.
Oh, God.
But it was such a weird place, Emma, because it was like a red brick building that was part of an apartment complex near the water. And I don't know what they did to the place, but it must have been soundproofed very well, because from the outside you could see all these windows which had been painted black on the inside, and that's obviously where the club was. But then right next to these windows were people's apartments. I imagine that H2O probably brought down the value of those flats quite a lot when it was in operation.
I bet. So you said your parents took a while to sort of come round. How long? Because I think the reason that I wanted to do this podcast and why, I think people find it really reassuring to listen is that even if they have a tough time with their parents, that actually hearing all these stories where people are, really struggle at the beginning, they do come around in the end, don't they? So how long a process was it for yours?
I think it probably took a couple of years to get to a stage where we could kind of talk about it in a very open fashion, I suppose. And maybe one of the catalysts for that was when I got my first kind of serious boyfriend. They got on well with him and it was all kind of okay. It just kept on getting better then, and in no time at all, it wasn't even an issue. This is the thing I think that I would tell anyone who's listening, if they are finding it difficult, with their parents, finding it hard with them coming out or whatever, that these things do take time. And I suppose some people might never fully want to understand it or want to accept it. And ultimately, that's their loss, isn't it? Because I think what my parents saw, and they saw this very quickly, they were like, well, okay, this is a shock. This is not what we were expecting at all. But at the same time, he is still Owain. He is still our son. And it doesn't change you, does it? People think that sometimes when you come out, this is a decision you've made and that you've decided to be gay, which is absolutely not true.
I don't fully understand that. I mean, who would choose it, frankly?
Yeah,
particularly
absolutely.
historically. It's a blooming nightmare sometimes. It's hard work being gay.
I agree. And, if I was not gay, my life would have been much easier earlier on. 100% in Ammanford. I wouldn't have had all these demons. I wouldn't have been worrying about all of this stuff that I was worrying about. And now, oh my God, I wouldn't change it for the world, of course, because I'm married. I've got an amazing husband. We have a great life together. But, early on, it can be really difficult. I don't think time is a healer, but I think time does make people come around sometimes, or it does make people realise what the situation really is.
And what about your work? Have you had any sort of issues coming out at work? Have you always chosen to be out at work, or has that been a bit of a gradual burner as well?
It was very strange for me when I first started working, because I told you earlier about the whole interest in lighting and the drumming as well. Well, the plan was to take a year out to get my grades up on the drums and then as a result be able to study percussion studies in Cardiff. But in the meantime, a friend of mine, Sam, who is still one of my best friends, Sam and Jo, they're two sisters from Swansea and they are just absolute darlings. Their mother, Anne, was basically keeping an eye open for jobs for me, and she saw this job advertised with BBC Wales where they were looking for a presenter for a new children's news programme, and it's essentially the Welsh version of Newsround. So Anne sent this cutting on to me and said, you should apply for this. So I did, and I went to the screen test, and oh my God, Emma, it was horrendous, because
Why?
Not only did I tip water over the set, but I swore. And this was a children's programme, remember?
Oh my God.
But they must have seen something and they gave me the job. So I then became the, I think, second youngest ever staff BBC presenter. Or I certainly was at the time, after Yvette Fielding, because I was like, I just turned 18 and I had this staff presenting job.
Wow.
Which doesn't really happen anymore.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, so the programme was called File. It was the Welsh version of Newsround. Very similar in format, a news programme for kids. And it was amazing because this was in the kind of early 2000s when everything was very different in TV. We had 4-5 TV channels. It was a massive studio full of these like amazing cameras, and it just all felt very kind of showbiz. And being propelled from Ammanford, working class Ammanford, to this TV studio where I was presenting this programme every day live was very bizarre, let me tell you. But being gay and being part of that was quite strange. I was lucky that the two producers of the programme, two amazing people called Joanne Kidd and Rhiann James, were the best TV producers you could possibly imagine. Not only did they know their audience inside out, they knew how to put a great programme together every day from scratch, but they were also very aware that you have to look after people in TV because sometimes it's not a nice place or whatever. So I felt fully supported by Joanne and Rhiann, and when I came out to them a while afterwards, actually, they sort of laughed and they were like, they had just kind of assumed that I was gay, but we never spoke about it, you know? It was like, well, who cares?
I'm guessing as careers go, TV is fairly all-encompassing and fairly welcoming to the LGBT family, isn't it? It's one of the creative fields. Yeah. So I'd imagine there's quite a lot of gays in radio. There's quite a lot of gays in TV.
Yeah, there are a lot of gays in TV. I agree, and I think that maybe made me feel a little bit better. But then at the same time, there were instances where I was working on other things, not that programme and not for that company, where I was told to kind of hide my sexuality and not talk about it. So I kind of felt that at one stage I was welcomed, you know, with open arms by Joanne and Rhiann, who were amazing people on the File programme at BBC Wales. But then at other times, you know, a couple of years down the line, I was reminded, do you know what, actually, we're not quite there yet still. And this would be in 2005, 6 and beyond.
It wasn't possible then for you to come out publicly and be gay as a children's TV presenter.
No, and I think that was it. You know, I think as a children's TV presenter, even though I was presenting news, so I wasn't, you know, jumping around in ball pools or getting covered in gunge, that sort of thing.
There's still time,
There's still time, darling, exactly. I think that's the next step for North West Tonight, actually. I think that I did get some reminders that not all people thought that being gay was okay. We're much better now, I think. We're getting to a place now where it is better, but you know, I'm sure you get the same, Emma. Every now and then people do remind me on Twitter that not everybody thinks that this is okay. Yeah, I think we're seeing less and less of that now, but
very few and far between. But yeah, you're right. As soon as you put yourself in the public eye, I've had the odd tweet or text from listeners, shall we say. Oh, I had one memorable one. Someone decided to text the station that I was working for, telling me I was a pervert. This was only a couple of years ago. I mean, wow.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, but as you say, it is fewer and further in between, thank goodness. So do you feel quite happy being out and proud as a gay man in the workplace now? Yes,
I do, definitely. And I think that there are small things that we can do sometimes, aren't there, to kind of help others in this sense. If you are a broadcaster, perhaps, or if you're in the public eye in this way, and I'm in no way someone who flies the flag on a daily basis, but one thing that is lovely about this job is, number one, how supportive BBC have been to me. BBC Yorkshire, when I worked for Look North, and also BBC North West Tonight now, who are just brilliant. You know, they want to kind of embrace it, and they want to kind of, well, it's you, isn't it? You can't change yourself. And I feel like finally we're at this place where it's not even an issue anymore. It's interesting how it's led to different things. I've done a lot of hosting Pride events over the years, and as you know, I love RuPaul's Drag Race. So it's strange how things lead to different things. And I did this forecast 3 years ago where I included a load of drag queen names. And I did it because it was like International Drag Day. Who the hell thought that was even a day? But
I didn't even know that, Owain. Thank you for enlightening me.
Oh my God. Well, listen, it's a day to celebrate, darling. It really is. So I thought, you know, I always do little weather forecasts for Pride events, and then I'm hosting them, and I try to be involved in the LGBTQ community where and when I can. But I did this weather forecast, which was basically like a load of drag queen names shoehorned into an actual meteorologically accurate weather forecast. Genius. And it went viral. RuPaul picked up on it. World of Wonder picked up on it. And it's strange how being able to embrace who I am now and what I like has also led to some really weird opportunities, you know.
Have you met RuPaul yet, then?
I haven't. That is definitely on the list of things that I absolutely need to do.
That has to happen.
I think.
It has to happen, darling.
Absolutely, darling.
So let's get some advice off you then, because you've gone on to be very successful and out and proud and gay. But there was a time when teenage Owain wasn't living his best life and really struggled a bit by the sounds of it. So what words of wisdom would you give to other people that have yet to go, a bit further down their journey in terms of coming out?
I'd say that it's okay, number one, and it might be difficult, absolutely, but surround yourself, or try to surround yourself with people who you trust and people who love you. And some people are going to find it really hard, and that's okay. And some people might not want to speak to you again. That's okay as well, because quite frankly, it's their loss, darling. I just think that this is you. You are who you are, and you can't change it. And why should you have to try and cover it up? I know it's probably easier for me to say that because I work in TV, in the kind of entertainment industry, where, as you said, it's more kind of welcoming. But yeah, just that it'll be okay in the end, I suppose.
So the thing is, you have come a long way on your journey, haven't you, Owain? So being in the public eye, as well as those sometimes the nasty tweets, you must get people who look up to you, or people that ask you for advice all the time. Do you get a lot of people from the LGBT community approaching you?
I get so many nice messages. It's amazing. And actually, I'm always surprised, and I don't know why I should be surprised. Maybe I get less surprised by it now. But when I think it was York Pride last year, actually, I was hosting. And this young guy came up to me, and he must have been, I don't know, about 15, something like that. And he just said, I just wanted to say thank you, that I love watching you presenting the weather and that you're just yourself. And that is amazing. And to me, that is the biggest kind of compliment is the wrong word, but it's just nice to know that in some way, me just doing my job, and yes, being unapologetically flamboyant and maybe sometimes mentioning Aaron on air, or, calling Roger Johnson Roger Darling, and bringing this level of camp into, presenting, that people do appreciate that, because we have on a national level a lot of kind of high profile LGBT people, but on a regional news level I think it's harder sometimes, number one, to get personality across, because it's about news and not personality ultimately. But people do really appreciate just that visibility, I think, Emma.
Well, of course they do. Well, just think what you were saying literally 15 minutes ago when you were growing up in, a small village in Wales.
Yeah.
You didn't have any of those role models. And just the more people that are on our screens or on our radio on a daily basis, it just normalises it, doesn't it? I mean, if you think about
Absolutely.
You are in the living rooms of, hundreds of thousands of people every night on their small screen. There'll be young kids watching you do the weather in front of their parents, and just having someone that is a bit flamboyant and a bit camp and obviously gay on the screen, it can be just a conversation opener, can't it?
That's
just normalises gay people, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and that's that's great. And I'm surprised sometimes by, I get lovely messages of people on Twitter, and sometimes I click through and look at their profiles, and sometimes I'm really surprised at the kind of people who actually like me, I'm like, this is really bizarre, but that's my own stereotypical view of people, I guess, isn't it, But it's really nice that people seem to enjoy what I do, and that the gay thing isn't even an issue. So yeah, that is really lovely.
It's not. And if you haven't seen Owain do his weather forecasts, because you don't live in the northwest of England, because we do have international listeners, Owain, obviously.
Oh, wonderful.
Please follow Owain on Twitter, because you do brilliant. I mean, you might not be interested in what the weather's doing in Manchester or Liverpool. It's worth going to watch Owain just do his thing. So I would recommend following you on Twitter wholeheartedly. Remind people of your handle.
So it's at Owain Wyn Evans.
A massive thank you to Owain, and if you are looking for him on Twitter, please be aware it's spelled Owain. You'll find him on Twitter. Oh, and do go and have a look, because since we spoke, he's also gone viral for his drumming to the BBC News theme. It's brilliant. He's a very talented boy. Go and have a look. Please do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from, and we'd also really appreciate it if you'd find the time to leave us a rating or a review. To find out more about Coming Out Stories, ask us a question, or even offer your own story for an interview, you can follow us on Twitter at Come Out Stories or at Coming Out Stories Pod on Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Emma Goswell, and Coming Out Stories is edited by Sam Walker and is a What Goes On Media production. In the next episode, you'll hear from Rachel. She identifies as being partially gender fluid or a cross-dresser. In the 1980s, she used to order clothes and shoes from what was referred to then as a transvestite catalogue. Well, the family found out about her secret when her brother opened her post.
My mum was doing the ironing, and when I walked in, she says, "We need to talk." So my mum and dad had obviously seen the catalogue. She said to me, gather all your clothes and your magazines and just put them in bin liners and throw them in the bin, and I'll come upstairs later and we'll talk. All of the clothing I'd bought at that stage, all went in the bin.